Good morning. My name's Kyle Houchins, and this is Getting Started with Rhino Windows. And with the release of version 6, Windows and Mac, the split is not that much anymore, if anything. We used to do, a different Mac, and we still do Getting Started Mac, Getting Started Windows. This is the Windows side. But the program itself is actually pretty close parity at this point. So the differences between the Mac and the Windows side are really not that much other than just some UI stuff at this point. So if this is your first time joining me in one of the getting started sessions, these are a little different than a lot of software demos or webinars that you may have seen. And it's kind of a hybrid. It's not quite a class. It's not quite a demo. It's intended to be a casual kind of interactive session between you and I, where I'm going to try and build a fairly simple model in about an hour, hour and a half, and talk about it along the way. And the difference between what I do and what a lot of software demos you may have seen is they're completely unrehearsed. And some of you may say, well, gee, that sounds like a very lazy way to do your job. And you'd be right in some respects, but there's a method to my madness in the fact that the reason I don't rehearse these is I want to simulate your experience when somebody walks into your office and hands you a sketch and says, build this. And you're looking at the sketch and you're looking at a blank sheet of Rhino paper or whatever here, and you try to figure out how to go from there to a model. And what I also want to simulate is any of the problems that you would experience from, as a good friend of mine, Dave Mills, likes to say, finding the way along the way, where you might not necessarily know how to pull this model off, but you just start and you figure it out as you go. And so I want to simulate that process, and I try to build products that are simple enough that we can do some form finding and some searching and some iterations and some go down blind alleys and make mistakes and back up and try again and talk about what went wrong and how to fix that. Let me shut my email off so it doesn't bother us the whole time. And the whole idea behind it is to simulate exactly what you experience. So what we're going to build today is this toaster idea that I just doodled up badly yesterday, and we're going to bring it in using the picture command. And the picture command in version 6 replaces picture frame in version 5, and picture frame replaced background bitmap if you joined us before version 5. And so you can see I just scrubbed this sketch out, really quickly. And the idea is this kind of very simple toaster shape. It's fairly rectilinear, but it's got some form to it, and so we want to talk about some subtle details like the feet on this are just slightly flared. This has a little inset. This has a little pocket and things like that. So if all goes well, we'll be able to pull this off in about an hour. If not, then you'll watch me crash it into the wall, which happens occasionally, which is always good television anyway. So let's go ahead and jump in. So I start every model almost the same way, where I either have some sort of chicken scratch sketch like this that I've done, which I usually don't show to anybody, by the way, because they're usually not worth showing. But it's just a communication between myself and myself in order to be able to start building intelligently. The idea behind this is we're going to bring it in and we're going to use it as an underlay. And the first thing that we need to do is make it appropriate for underlaying, because if I start drawing over this, you can see it can be difficult to see the geometry that we put over it. So if I pick this and I go to the properties, which is this tab here, and if you don't have this tab, if you right click on any of the other tabs, it brings up a list of all of the tabs that you can load. And you just want to make sure that the properties tab is loaded. So we're going to go to the properties for this object, and we're going to go to the materials button, which is here. And you'll see that its name is toaster because that's the name of the sketch. And then you can see down here at the bottom, there's a transparency slider. We're just going to drag this over, and you can see that the image drops back and becomes more transparent as we get closer to 100. So I'm going to drop it somewhere in there like 64, 65%. And then that way I can draw over it, and you can see, the geometry is much easier to see at this point. Now, the next thing I need to do is figure out how big this thing is. And I'm working in inches, I believe. Let me see, I should actually check and make sure, but yeah, so I'm working in inches, and so we'll figure that this thing, let's call it like, I don't know, 7 inches, 8 inches, something like that. I think that's probably, I'm guesstimating here, maybe 11 inches. Let's do 11 inches. And we'll do super precise measurements. So I'm going to just draw a line that's 11 inches long, and I'm going to just make a little hook on the end of it so that I can see what's going on. I'm going to just tap the foot of this thing over here at 11, and actually we're pretty close. And I'm going to scale it to match so that I know that that is now 11 inches. Once I get it scaled, I can get rid of this. And then the last thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just take this and slide it straight back in space so that when I build something, it's not bisecting the object. I don't like it when the image is like this, because when you shade it, you get half of the image on one side, half of the image on the other, and you can't see what's going on. So I like to slide this back in space so that it's outside the modeling window, and then start building from there. And then you can decide. I personally, and it's just a glitch of mine, I like building on the positive side of the quadrant. So I'm going to just slide this over here, and then we can have this set up on a layer. And I'm going to just change this layer by double clicking to front, and then I'm going to change the object layer so that this is now on the front layer. And the reason I do that is because now I can turn it on or off. Okay, I can also lock it. But since this is a 3 view, I need to get not only I need to get the top view and the front view also. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to copy this, copy paste, Control C, Control V. I'm going to use Gumball to rotate it 90, and you can see the direction of the arrows is positive. So if I needed to go the other way, I would go -90, but I want to go this way. Hit Enter, and you'll see a copy that pops up. And I'm going to take this, go to the right view, and I'm going to just slide this over till it is in the center-ish, something like that. Use Gumball, or use my nudge keys to move it around a little bit. And we're going to call that, I'm going to call that center. Maybe call that center. Same thing, I'm going to slide this out of the modeling window over here so it's out of the way, and then I'm going to make a new layer. I can either right click, I can either double click, or I can right click and go to rename. And I'm going to do this the right view. Right. And then I'm going to assign right click, change object layer, and then I can turn that one on or off too. And then I can do the same thing with the top view. I think I'm going to have enough information off the front and the side that I'm not going to need the top, but I can always do that later if I need to. So the last thing I want to do is lock both of these layers so that I can't select them. And then since I'm going to work on the front view first, I'm just going to hide the side view because I don't really need to see that for right now. And then we'll zoom in. So we know we've got it the right size. The transparency is knocked down, and we're on layers, and now we can start modeling. And because this is a pretty simple object, right? It's basically a rounded square, and you'll kind of get used to seeing, different form languages as you're doing this. And this is just kind of a rounded square type of thing. So we're going to start off. I'm going to draw a center line down the middle of this thing. I'm going to call that the center, and something like that. Maybe I'll slide that over just a little bit. Something like that. I'm going to call that the center. And then I'm going to just start drawing from the center line. I'm going to shift drag to go straight out because I know the first point that I place is going to match the first point on this side. And if these 3 points are lined up, it's going to be tangent. So I'm going to pull out to here, maybe even pull out to here. And then I'm going to drag down something like here, and then I'm going to add another point, and I'm going to catch that flare detail. This foot has just a little flare on it. And you can see that my curve is horribly off, so I'm going to just adjust it using Gumball and drag this around until it matches what I want it to look like. And I want to use as few points as possible because I want the curve to be as smooth as possible. And in that case, I think I'm in pretty good shape. Maybe I'll pull this out just a hair more. Nudge keys. And my curve is probably not drawn as a mathematically accurate spline, so I'm going to defer to the Rhino data as opposed to my scribbly, caffeine-addled chicken scratch sketch. Call that probably good right there. I'm going to just take this and mirror it using the mirror command, or I can grab it from the toolbar down here. It lives down here. By the way, if I hotkey something or if I do something and you're like, whoa, where was that tool? Hit the chat and let me know. I have a habit of hotkeying during demos, and I know that's not ideal for learning. So if I blow past a command and you're like, whoa, 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 what was that? Let me know. All right, so there's our exterior shape. I'm gonna just do this as a flat surface for right now. We'll worry about the rest of this later. But let's just do this as a planar surface right now. Maybe this is going to have some curvature to it, and we can add that. If we look at the control points, if we do the points on here, you can see that this is a degree 1 surface. There's only 4 points on this thing. So if we want to do any editing to this thing whatsoever, we have to add a few more points. And I'm going to do that with the change degree command. And I'm going to just click on this, and I'm going to change it from a degree of 1, meaning it's only got 2 control points, to degree 3, which is going to give me 4 control points in both directions. And now I can do things like this. Boop, 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 right? So that's why I did this, so that I can have a little bit of extra detail and a little bit of extra data in here, because I don't know. I have to look at the top of this, and it appears that this is dead straight. But here's my spiel on sketches or copying sketches. Unless the sketch is absolutely positively amazing and you want it to look exactly like the sketch, use your sketches as reference, right? Make your design decisions in 3D. We're not copiers, right? We're not Xerox machines. You're not trying to just copy a sketch and put it in 3D. Unless you are, and then that's fine. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. But for me, I always try to use my sketch as a guideline and let the model be the rule. And I try to make all my decisions based on whether or not, you know, the product is doing what I want it to do in 3 dimensions. And so I have to decide, like, do I want the sides of this thing to be dead flat? You know, is this surface right here on this model, is it dead flat or isn't it? And in this case, if I'm looking at the sketch, it's looking like this stuff is actually pretty flat. So I may leave it. I may, you know, I was always taught, I came from an automotive design background, and I was always taught there's no straight lines in cars. And so we might like add like just that much curvature so that it doesn't look concave, right? And so a lot of times if you want, like on a car, if you draw a straight line on a car, once you put the wheels and everything in there, it actually looks like the curve is doing, the line is doing this. And so in most car design, you'll actually see, instead of straight lines, you'll see the slightest arc to it, right? And that makes the line, that keeps the line from drooping in. This is Design Theory by Kyle. So I might just add just the tiniest little bit of curvature to this thing so it doesn't look like it's concave. Now, I may get down the road and decide that that's dumb and we may change it, but for now, let's just roll with it. So So let's take this now and let's add our thickness to it. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to just mirror this, and I'm going to just pick an arbitrary distance at this point because I'm going to add this. And actually what I can do is I could even do something nutty like measure it and say this thing, half of it is 3.25. So so that would be 650. So let's mirror this and move it 650. So if we take it and we mirror it, actually let's do this. Let's move this negative 325. And I'm going negative because it's going against the arrow. Let's move it out there. Now we can mirror it around the center line. And we know that we should be 650 total. Hooray! All right, now, does the no straight lines theory apply to motorcycles as well? You know, Ollie, I think in my mind, yes, because I think anything that's dynamic, anything that looks like it's going through the wind, I was always taught that there are no such things as an exactly straight line on a vehicle. So it's always got to have a little bit of arc to it. That you know is arguable in a number of circumstances, but that's kind of where I stand. So. All right, so let's connect these. We're going to just do that with loft. And because we built this using two curves, we get two surfaces and two edges. We may be able to join this edge. Let's take a look. There's a tool down here, and I don't know if you've used it before, but it's called, and it hides down here, the merge and split edges. So if we merge edge, you can see that we can get rid of that secondary edge. And let me show you what it looks like beforehand. So if we turn on our show edges command, gotta go backwards. Here we go. If I turn on the show edges command, you'll see that there's actually a point here, and that's because this is an edge and this is an edge. And the reason that is because we made it out of two curves. Even though they're joined, it's not one curve, it was a poly curve. We would have had to have rebuilt it in order to get it from a poly curve into one curve. And I didn't want to do that because it would change the shape of the curve a little bit. So what we'll do is we'll come down here and we'll merge this edge. And this is super useful, by the way. So merge and split edge. If you haven't seen this before, let me just dock this guy. Split edge allows you to, like, say for instance, I just wanted to build a surface from here to here, right? If I split the edge, I can do that, right? I'm not locked into using the entire edge. If I merge the edges, I can get rid of all of that and then end up with lofting something that's just a single surface. Let's align the curves. There we go. If you haven't used that before, if your loft ever does this, you notice these lines are crossed. Click on one of the four dots that makes it up, and it will reverse that order and straighten it out. So now we've got our object. I'm going to go ahead and join it together. So now we've got a single object. And this edge analysis, by the way, which lives also down here, all of this pink stuff is an open edge. So that means that this is an open poly surface, which means this is not watertight. So I use this a lot, this show edges, to be able to see whether something's joined or not. Now, it makes sense at this point, before we start getting too crazy with this, is just to take a look and say, okay, is it lining up in that direction? It's not lining up in this direction because we don't have the flare set up the way we want. And clearly I didn't get this in the right position. So let's slide this over. And so this drawing looks like I didn't project it entirely accurately to the front view. So let's fix that. So let's take this, and I'm going to just scale it a little bit. like that, and we'll match the drawing. And then you can see that I don't have the flare on the bottom here. I have it on the front, but I don't have it on the side, and we'll fix that in a little bit. And what we need to do first, though, is to make the rounds on here. Maybe we should split it up first. Let's split it up into two parts first. Let's do that. So we've got a top part and a bottom part. This top part looks like it's going to be chrome. The bottom part looks like it's going to be some sort of plastic. So I'm going to just shoot a line through here, and I'm going to use the split tool, which is over here. And I'm going to just split this into two pieces. So now I've got this chrome part here, and I've got this here. If I go to the right view, this is fine. I just have to deal with knocking the corner off, but I do need to add this flare in here. And the way that I'm going to do that, let's focus on that because I think it's important to get that done first. So in order to do that, we're going to do some point sculpting. And to do some point sculpting, I need to break it up because I can't turn points on for a poly surface. See, it's going to just say, can't do it. So I need to explode first. And then if I turn the points on, you're going to notice something about this. See how it carries all of the untrimmed points with it? That's great, except it's not super ideal for point editing. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grab all of this stuff and I'm going to run a command called shrink trim surface. And when I shrink the trim surface, you'll see that the points that it was carrying go away and return to the boundaries of this object. Now, if this was a non-square object, it would still carry the trimmed points. And let me just show you an example of that. So if I have a surface like this, right, four-sided surface, if I turn the points on, it's out here like this. Let me just change degrees so we have more points. So I've got this like that. If I trim this into a weird shape, you can see that it still carries the trim points out here. If I shrink, because it's not square, it's only going to shrink to the bounding box of that area. So if I were to untrim this, that's the size of the four-sided surface that it shrank to. Now, this is still more useful than the other one, but I just want you to understand the difference. If it's a square surface, the points will go inside the boundary. If it's not a square surface, you're going to be outside the boundary. So because I have the flare in this direction, I don't really need to do much to the side surfaces, right? So I can actually delete these because I'm just going to rebuild them because these surfaces match, right? And I've already got the right shape at the end. So all I need to do is get the correct front shape. So I'm going to turn the points on for this, go to the right-hand view, grab these, and I'm going to scale them out like that. And that actually is not bad. I may move the secondary points just a tiny little bit. And I'm using scale instead of move because it allows me to do both of them at the same time. So now I've got the right flare here. I've got the right flare here. I may actually just push this just a hair like that. Just give it a little bit more sassiness. And then we'll just simply loft this back together and we'll get everything that we want. Not only are we going to get what we want, but notice that the isoparams are very close to matching up, which is nice as well. I'm going to join it again. Just type the join command. And then bring everything back and take a peek and see what we look like. So I've got the flare in that direction. It's all following the way that I want it to go. And then the other thing is I'm noticing that there's a very slight step between the chrome object and the plastic object, almost like the chrome sits down inside the plastic. So I'm going to just scale it in one direction from this way. And then same thing, one direction this way. And that gives me my step. Okay, and we can model around that later. I'm not terribly concerned about it. So let's get the rounds on this thing. And the way I'm going to do that is using the fillet edge, blend edge. And if this tool has two different tools on it. The left mouse button is fillet, and fillet is just a circular fillet. It's a rolling ball fillet. It has no continuity. It just throws a circle in there. And because it just throws a circle in there, the edges sometimes can look a little harsh. And I'll show you the difference. I'm going to do one side with fillet and the other side with blend, and we'll decide which one looks better. So let's do fillet. I'm going to just do this side. And if we go to the right view and we go to here, we can change the size of the fillet. And you'll see that it's not quite exactly what we wanted. So let's go back, let's undo it, let's run it again. I'm going to use the previous edge selection up here, boop. And then I'm going to change the radius. I'm going to use set all. I'm going to change it to like 1.5. And that's a lot closer to what I was looking for. And if we shade it, you'll see, actually let's render it. You'll see that it has this kind of harsh edge on it, right? And it's okay, but it kind of feels a little SolidWorksian. And I'm not using that as a pejorative. It's just that SolidWorks fillets have a certain feel to them. They tend to be a little mechanical and lifeless. And if we compare that to, if we right click in this and do a blend, and we do this at 1.5, and we shade them both, see how it doesn't have that edge on it? See how that feels a little, see how this almost feels like it's got a corner on it, where this one doesn't? And they are different shapes, right? I mean, it's very clear, like one is this shape and one is that shape. And this one is a rolling ball, so this is a perfect arc. This, on the other hand, is using continuity. It's actually working off of, I think it's G1 continuity, so it's tangent continuity. I personally prefer this one. So I'm going to undo both of these, and I'm going to do it with blends on both sides. And I'm going to run it like that. And you can see that it gives just a nicer, it just doesn't have that shadowy corner here. You see that? Am I the only one that sees that, or are you guys with me? So I already have the tool going, so I'm just going to run it again. And let's just go ahead and run it on these four edges as well. And as everything goes right, it should just do its thing. And it did. So now we've got the basis of our thing. So sorry, somebody's calling me. So we've got the basis of our toaster. So now we need to just start working on the details, and we can decide, you know, which one we want to work on. Do we want to work on the base? Do we want to work on the top? I'm kind of thinking we'll start with the base, and this is going to be fairly simple. And I'm going to do the same thing that I did before. Actually, let's not. Let's use a circle. I'm going to use a circle. I'm going to make a big, huge circle, and I'm going to snap it to the center line, and then I'm going to use this as a trim object. Like that. And maybe it is a complete arc, or maybe it's not. We'll see. So it looks like it's not quite an arc. So I'm going to go and, or not quite a circle. So I'm going to scale it until I get what I want. Something like that, I think, is probably about what we're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to build this solid for now. So I'm actually going to pull this out here, and then I'm going to extrude it right through the model using the extrude dot in V6. Please tell me everybody's using that. And then I'm going to just use these two objects as trim objects. I'm going to trim this off and trim this off. And it's not letting me trim that. I think it's not letting me trim this because it's an extrusion object. There's two different types of objects in Rhino. There's extrusions. Yeah, see, this is an extrusion. So if I explode this, it changes from an an extrusion into a surface, there's a setting in here. So when you extrude something, this is what's called an extrusion object, and this is for like large projects. If you're doing a stadium and it's got 10,000 seats in it, you can extrude the seats, and the geometry on it is a lot lighter than a surface, because if I turn the control points on, it's only got the height and the diameter, whereas the regular surface has a lot more information on it, right? So this is more information for Rhino to carry. So there's a command called use extrusions. Planar extrusion object output type. Right now it's set to extrusion, and this is typically the default. I'm going to just go ahead and change that to polysurface. And now when I extrude something, this is a surface object. Extrusions are great because they're lightweight, but they're also a pain because they don't do things because they're lightweight. And it looks like this is still misbehaving. Let's see. Let's try. I'm going to rotate it 180 just to get the seam out of the way. And let's see if that helps. Might just be a seam issue. Nope. All right. So when you have an object, oh, duh, this is exactly why it's not. So, all right. This is why it's not trimming. It's not a closed object. See this? This is not closed, so it's not going to trim. What I have to do is this. Derp. See, this is why I make the mistakes, so you don't have to. Now, if I trim using this and these curves, now I have a closed boundary. Now it'll trim. Won't trim if you don't have a closed boundary. Grandpa always used to say, make sure your boundaries are closed. So if I join this up, and then I run the cap command, this is now a closed polysurface. So at this point, if I wanted to, I could print that part because it's watertight. I could just output it as a mesh and go from there. All right. This part is not watertight, so I'm just going to run the cap command and make it watertight. Now, if I wanted to, I could take these two things and Boolean them together, and now I have a single object that is watertight. If I run the show edges and it says no naked edges, no manifold edges, I know that this is a watertight part. Now, there's a secondary little doodad in the bottom of this thing, which is like where I'm imagining the toaster's guts and heating element and electronics and crumb tray and all that stuff go. So let's go ahead and make that. And we're going to make that with a, we'll just make it with a cube and we'll just round it off. Delete this. So let's do it with a cube. I'm just going to do it with a center cube. I'm going to start at the midpoint and then this midpoint and bring it out there until it has an intersection, and then let's just do something like that. I'm going to just call it 2 inches and then we'll stick it where it needs to go. Boop, something like that. And I'm assuming that it's going to come all the way out like this. And let's go to the right-hand view. And yeah, that's probably, maybe I'll tuck it in a little bit like that. And I'm going to leave that be for right now because I still need to cut this notch right here. So let's go ahead and cut that notch. I'm going to do this starting in the center. I'm just going to draw a circle that's about the same diameter and drop it down. And then I'm going to just scale it out like that. Now I can do the same thing where I can just I can just extrude this thing like that, but because this is now a closed object, I can actually use a command called wire cut. And wire cut allows you to, if you've ever cut foam on a hot wire, that's exactly what this does. So this is my cutting curve. This is the object I'm going to cut through. It's going to go C-plane normal, so it's going to go straight into the screen. And then I have it actually set to keep the pieces in case I wanted to do something like with it, but in this case I don't, so I'm just going to delete it. And we've got the basis of our toaster. All right, now I may want to round off the insides of these things. Not sure yet. Maybe I do. Let's see what it looks like. If we run a blend edge on this and this, and it's set to 1.5, which I know is way too big, so I'm going to actually use set all and do like 0.25. That's maybe not enough, so let's use previous edge, and let's do set all and do like 0.75. We can even preview it to see and make adjustments, and I think that actually probably, I don't want to go too much farther because I'm going to bite into this. So I'm going to run that and let it go. And then this thing, oh, by the way, there's a cool trick in Rhino, and I have it hotkeyed, and I do it all the time, so I apologize. Let me explain it. There's a command called isolate. And what it does is you pick this object and right click, and it hides everything except the object that you picked. It's super useful. And I'm going to blend edge on all of this stuff. And I'm going to use, well, I use 0.75 and see how it goes. Maybe that's a little bit too much. So let's do set all and do let's do 0.5. That'll probably work. So I'm going to run it, bring everything back, and then we've got this thing in here. Now, maybe now is the time when I say, okay, I'm going to vary from the sketch, and I'm going to say this needs to be a little closer here, and this needs to be a little closer here, because I don't like all of that step under there, and I need more room for my stuff. So let's go ahead and do that, and then I'm going to just Boolean the two things together. Boop. And we've got our crumb tray. Now, I may want to run a fillet around here. Why not? But I'm going to use blend instead because I like blend. I'm going to use chain edges, and I'm going to have it chain the whole thing. And then I'm going to run it, and it's going to be way too big. So I'm going to do set all, 0.1, let the preview run. Maybe I want to do a little bigger than that. So let's do set all, 0.25. And that broke it, so let's go back. That's too big. So let's do set all again, 0.2. And we'll find the sweet spot where it doesn't come apart. The problem is it's blowing past something and trimming itself. It can't fit a radius that big into there. So I'm going to go ahead and accept that and say okay. And if we look at it, now we've got some good stuff going on there. And I do like the sharp edges on this thing, but I might knock them off just the tiniest little bit, like just put a little micro fillet on there because I don't like sharp edges. So let's do that. Let's do this one and this one. Somebody is calling me repeatedly despite the fact that I keep saying I can't talk right now. There should be a button on an iPhone that says, what part of I can't talk right now are you struggling with? No, I'm not being rude. I just really can't talk to you right now. All right, let's set all. I'm going to do something really small like 0.08 because I just want to knock the edges off. Still too big, so let's do 0.04. Still too big, so let's do previous edge selection. Let's do 0.02. We'll get one that works. There we go, 0.02 works. Usually what happens when it's doing that is it can't fit the radius in somewhere. And the one thing I will say, all right, so we know 0.02 works. One thing I will say about Rhino is when Rhino fails, it's like that old Monty Python skit where the guy runs up to the king and says with an arrow, he says, "Message for you, sir," and someone hits him with an arrow and he dies. You know, Rhino's kind of like that guy. in the fact that when it fails, it at least tries to give you something before it dies. So if I blend edge on this stuff and I say previous edge selection and I say 0.04 and it says, see, it's not going to work, and I say, give me the message anyways before you die, and I do this, it's going to do it, and it will actually give me the surfaces that made up that trim. It just won't put them in automatically. So if I wanted to go in and force a 0.04 radius in here, I could do it, or a 0.04 blend in this case. I could actually do it, but I'd have to go in and manually trim it out myself. And people look at this as a fault, and they say, Rhino failed, and it didn't give me my trim. And I say to them, well, in SolidWorks, it just would have failed and not given you anything. In Pro E, it would have just failed and not given you anything. And there's always some Pro E guy in the audience that says, no, it wouldn't. But in my experience, it just would say, and not give it to you. Rhino, at least it gives you this, and then you could go in and manually trim this out and then build this in if you wanted to. All right. Worst software ever. All right, so let's go ahead and use previous edge selection here. We know our 0.02 worked, so let's go ahead and throw that in, set all 0.02, let it run, and we're good. So we've got most of our body built. We've got our little corners knocked off. We're happy about that. There's a little transition in here that I wouldn't mind knocking off, and I think I may actually use a very, very small blend on that as well. I'm going to use chain edges on this to get the whole thing. And we're going to have to kind of pay attention to see how small of a fillet we can put on here. And you can see over here that it's set to 1.5 right now. I'm going to just drag the handle, and you might not be able to see this because it's gray on gray. My feedback items are set to gray and my model is set to gray. But I'm going to drag the handle until it fits in there, which looks like it's about 0.025 fits in there. So I'm going to do 0.02, just so that if a machinist were to build a mold of this thing at a later date, they wouldn't hate my guts for making it 0.02317 because there's no bit that fits in that, right? A 0.02, anything that you do that's kind of a nominal measurement, your mold makers will hate you a lot less if you use nominal measurements that standard tools fit, instead of having to use a little tool and do 4 passes or get a custom tool made or something like that. You'll make them a lot happier. So I try to stick with kind of standard numbers when I use fillets and things like that. So for the most part, we've got this thing built, right? It's got all of our most complicated parts in it. We need to build this little cove on the side, but because we're impatient, let's go ahead and let's do our toaster slots. And I'm gonna go ahead and use a rounded rectangle tool up here. I'm gonna pick the rounded option, and I'm also gonna do it from the center. And I'm gonna start here, and I'm just gonna go out to the edge, and then, actually, let's do this. I'm gonna make this longer, because I wanna do that. So let's do rounded rectangle again from the center. Rounded, do somewhere in here, and then I'm just gonna drag it out and bring my rounded parts in there. And all I have to do to get that in the right spot is just rotate it with Gumball 90. And then look at my right-hand view and figure out vaguely where it needs to go. If I want to get super precise, I can relocate the gumball and snap it. Be good if I relocated the gumball to the right spot. There we go. And then snap it. Now, if your gumball doesn't respond to snaps, if you go here, you can see that there's 2 types of dragging. There's smooth dragging and snappy dragging. Smooth dragging might be the default. If it doesn't respond to O-snaps, then change it to snappy dragging and it will. And the other thing about O-snaps, if you notice down here, all of my O-snaps at the bottom, I actually run disabled. right? I run the OSNAP's disabled. And the reason I do that is if they're not disabled and you try to do something, it's going here, 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 snap, 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 snap. And it's really it's kind of distracting to me. Like I can't really I want to be close to the end of this, but it's like, no, here, 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 go here, here, here. It's like, whoa, settle down. So I actually run these disabled, and then the temporary hotkey to enable them is the Alt key. So I can come down here and I can place a point out here without worrying about the snap overriding it. And then if I want to, like say instance, I wanted to go right here, and then I wanted to snap to the end, if I hold down Alt, it snaps to the end. And so I know this point I can place precisely because the snap isn't overriding it. And then this point I can place it precisely because I can turn the snap on while I need it. So I run these disabled all the time and then use the Alt key to turn it on and off. And I think on the Mac, if you're boot camped into the Mac side using PC, which you don't need to do anymore because the Mac version of Rhino is good and our CloudZoo license is cross-platform. If you didn't know that, you should know that. If you own version 6 and you license in CloudZoo, you can run your license on a Mac or a PC without having to buy a different copy. I'll pause and let that settle in while I drink coffee for a second. All right, so we've got this placed. I'm going to just mirror it across the center line. And then I'm going to take both of these guys and I'm going to just use the extrude icon and just drag them in here like this. And I didn't have the solid option turned on, so these are open, so I'm going to just select them and cap. Now those are solid objects, and then we just are simply going to go ahead and Boolean this. Now, if you look at the sketch carefully, and I know you didn't, and I hope you didn't because it's a terrible sketch, but if we look at this carefully, you'll see that there's actually a slight recess around this where it's almost like it steps in a little bit and then there's a little, like maybe the metal skin has something just under the lip of it. That detail is actually super easy to create, and we'll do it on one side first and then we'll flip it over to the other. So if I take this and I copy paste and I scale it just a hair in this direction and just a hair in this direction. And then I make a cutter block out of it. And the way that I'm going to make a cutter block out of it is I'm going to actually Boolean subtract the model from the cutter. So I'm going to subtract from this using this, and I don't want to delete the input. And what that's going to do is that's going to give me a cutter block that has the right profile, right? This is a profile. So now imagine this is cookie dough, and I'm going to just take this and I'm going to squish it into the cookie dough just a little bit. See where I'm going here? Then I'm going to Boolean this from this, and I will get rid of the thing. But first I'm going to mirror it because this is what I want on both sides. Does that make sense? So like if you want to make something that's got a flat bottom, you can just stick it in there. If you want it to have a curved bottom or a curved profile, then you cut away from the block first and then push the block in and then cut away from the object. Okay? Did I explain that reasonably, or is everybody just like, what are you talking about? So now I'm going to cut this out of here, and you can see that I get my little step in there, right? And now I'm going to pull out this. And then I've got my toaster with my little relief. Now, I am going to want to round that, so I'm going to put a teeny, 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 tiny round on both of those. Chain edges. And it was set to 0.02. Let's see if it'll run. Looks like it's too big, so I'm going to set all 0.01. And it looks like that will run, so I'm going to go with that. And I'm going to do the same thing on the inside. And I'm going to do the same thing here. the same thing here. So now that gives us that nice little reveal on that edge there. See that? Now, the way that I'm going to render this is I'll probably just mock up some fake toast or something in here. I'm not going to do a like, look at all the mechanism inside this shot. I'm going to do a, you know, sitting on the counter like, ah, you know, beauty shot. So I'm not going to worry about like putting the internals in here. But if I was, you know, I would go ahead and mock all that stuff up. And, you know, if I wanted to show it lit, I would build the burners in there. And then I would, you know, assign a material that has some glow to them. And, you know, really blow that out. But we've got 10 minutes, so 10 minutes plus. I don't want to kill you guys doing the internal mechanisms. Any questions so far? By the way, these sessions are supposed to be interactive, so if I haven't bored you to death already, if you have any questions or you see anything in here that's not making sense to you, let me know. All right, so let's save this because I'm tempting fate. It's actually a testament. How much I use Rhino, it's actually a testament to how stable Rhino is, how often I forget. I'll model for 2 or 3 hours without actually saving, which is a really bad habit. But all right, so let's clean up a little bit. So I've got a bunch of curves here, so I'm going to run the cell CRV, cell curve command. And I'm going to just throw these on a layer. Anytime I am working on a client project or anything like that, I always save my curves because of the inevitable modifications that are going to come after I finish the model. So I'm going to change those, and then I'm just going to hide them. And then when I do curves in the future, I'll just throw them on and you know, throw them on that layer, and then that way I need them. And when the client says, "Oh, we're going to change something," I can just go bloop and bring it back. All right. So the last thing we need to do is build a little dial on the side. And I don't need this thing anymore because it's just in the way, so I'm just going to shut it off. And so now I can just focus on this. And so we're going to build a little dial, and there's not a whole lot of information on what this dial looks like. So I'm going to kind of make it up. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to pick the center of this thing like that. And I'm actually going to hide this because I want to focus just on this for a second. And let's just figure it out. So I'm going to draw a circle, and it looks like my sketch is not centered, which is fine. So let's do this and say, okay, that's the outer limit. Copy paste, shift drag, that's the inner limit. Let's say there's a little flat on top of that. Copy paste, shift drag. Let's say there's a step in. I'm kind of reading there's a little step in there. So paste again, shift drag, something like that. And then I'm thinking that probably this button is going to be domed. So let's figure out like what kind of dome is going to go on there. Actually, we'll do that with a sphere later. That's fine. I'll show you how to get around that. So check this out. Let's loft this to this. And I'm going to do this all with history on. So let's loft this to this. And then let's loft this edge to this curve. And then let's loft this edge to this curve. And you're like, you made a flat thing, stupid. And I'm like, yes, I know. I know, but not stupid. So if I grab this and I pull it, history, oh, let's do the curve. History will update it, and I can start messing with it and seeing what I want it to look like. So I'm going to pull this curve. Oops. No, let's not rotate it. Let's move it. So see how I can now iterate with this thing? Because history is enabled, I can now decide what I want that thing to look like. And if this flat is too big or too small, I can just scale it and it gets bigger. I can scale it, it gets smaller. And I kind of like that as an overall feel. So let's go ahead and let's make the domed part of it. And I'm going to do that with a center sphere. I'm just going to snap this to the center, and then I'm going to just snap this to the edge. And that makes a sphere, but I don't want it to be that big of a sphere, so I'm going to just drop it down like this. And then I'll use this curve to trim the back, and then I'll join it up. And we should, if we check our edges, we should only have a naked edge around the edge. Okay. Now, when I joined that up, my history went away, which is fine because I was done iterating. The last thing I'm going to do is Shift Control click the surface edge. There we go. And then I'm going to just extrude the edge straight back. Did a sub-object selection and then an extrude. I'll join this up. Are you guys down with the sub-object selection? You know what I'm talking about when I say that? Anyone? Bueller? Sub-object selection. So this is a polysurface, right? One polysurface added, and it's a polysurface because it's got a bunch of surfaces that are joined together. Now, a sub-object selection, a sub-object can be a surface of a polysurface, or it can be an edge of a polysurface, or it can be a curve, or it can be a, you know, things like that, right? So I'm gonna hide my curves now. I'm gonna just throw them here. And if I look at this, I don't have any naked edges, right? Because it's closed, but I do have, if I Shift Control click, I do have a surface here. Now, the cool thing about this is sub-object selection allows you to do some modification, especially on an object that's made up of degree 1 surfaces, which only have 2 control points. So if I Shift Control click this and I shift drag on a scale handle, I can modify this thing. It's not history, it's a sub-object selection modification. So there is a secondary iteration that I can do here. If that thing is too shallow, I can make it deeper. If it's too deep, I can make it shallower. And see, because it's all connected as a polysurface, if I do that sub-object selection with Shift Control click, it allows me to access that stuff and then go from there. I can also do stuff like this, Shift Control click on an edge, and if I scale this edge, I can make it go like that. So what this allows you to do, think about this from a different perspective. If I were to make a bunch of clip art, like say for instance, I had a button that was like this and I had 10 other buttons, I could take these and throw them in a file, maybe on a Dropbox, maybe in a folder called clip art, and I would have all of these objects in here that I could then just simply drag back into a model. So I would never have to build a button dial like this ever again, right? Or this could be a camera lens, or it could be a gun sight, or it could be a, you know, whatever. This is America, everything's a gun sight, unfortunately. But being able to sub-object select allows you to be able to drop it back into a different model and then make modifications to it as you need, right? So that's a super cool, super powerful way to be able to reuse assets and not model something 2, 3, 4, 5 times, okay? So let's go ahead and finish this guy up. It has a little toast icon on here, so I'm gonna just draw something toast-like. I'm gonna start kind of in the center, somewhere in here. Let's start, there we go. And I'm gonna rough it out right now. If I hit the M key, it switches from lines to arcs, but doesn't look like an arc's gonna get me there. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop on that, and then I will draw a 3-point arc. Like that. And then just take this and flip it. Actually, I want to change that a little bit. So I'm going to change degree to 3, and that gives me more. Actually, I'm going to explode it first. I'm going to change this curve to degree 3. I have a hotkey set up for that. And that allows me to go, instead of having just 2 points the way it was drawn, I've got 4 points now and I can modify it. So let's do that. Let's just throw a couple of tiny fillets on here just to make it a little friendlier and a little toastier looking. And that looks a little skimpy. So I'm going to grab all of these points and turn them on. And I'm going to grab all of the points except for the center line ones. I'm going to just drag this out. And because mirror has history, it will update across the line of reflection. All right, so that's kind of a decent toast icon. Let's make our little uppy downy buttons. And I'm going to start that in the center. I'm going to just come back to the center line and I'm going to mirror that just so I know that it's symmetrical. I don't want to have asymmetrical arrows. Join that. Mirror it above. And that, if you push the button once, the toast goes down. If you push the button again, it comes up. You know, we're being real super technical about this, about this model. And then I'm going to grab all these curves. I'm going to just pull them out here so I can see them. And then I'm going to extrude them into the model. I'm going to grab all of this and cap. There is a solid option for that extrude. So, and it looks like this didn't cap for some reason. Oh, because it's not joined. Derp. Join it first, then cap. There we go. And then we're going to do the same thing. Because I want the bottom of this to follow the button, I'm going to Boolean away from the cutter blocks first. So I'm going to subtract from these objects using this object, and I'm not going to delete the input. And then I'm going to take these, push them in a little bit, and then do the reverse, Boolean from this, using this, and I will delete the input. And that gives me my little recess in there. And maybe this button is smooth, maybe this is a little light up thing, maybe it's a display, you know, that tells you how much toastiness is going on. Maybe it's got a little LED that goes from top to bottom that shows you how dark it is or whatever, but that's a little past our pay grade right this minute. Now, there's an indication that there's some sort of turny part here so that it's got little ribs on it. So let's go ahead and make those. And then all we have to do is make the recess and assign some materials and we'd be done. So we're at 10:03 right now, so we're an hour and 3 minutes. We're probably 15 minutes from being wrapped, just to give you an ETA. And I'm gonna do this with little discs. I'm gonna start this at a quad. And I want it to be about that big and about maybe 0.1 wide. I'm going to go to the top view. I'm going to rotate it 90. Maybe those are too wide. Go to the front view. I'm going to just tuck it in here like that. I'm going to make sure that it doesn't poke out anywhere. Looks pretty good. I'm going to knock the sharp edges off of it just with a real quick blend, a teeny tiny one. And it's good to do this before you array it because it's going to save you a lot of time later. And then we're going to do a polar array. Tool, transform, array, polar. Now, the thing that I want you to realize here, right? We have not done anything complicated. We have not done anything other than just use straight Rhino tools. We turned some CV points on, but you should be doing that anyways. So let's try 30. That looks like a decent amount. I'm okay with that. So let's run it. And then let's Boolean this whole thing together. And if the Boolean gods are smiling on us, it will run, and it did. So we've got our nice little button here. Okay, I'm going to stick these on the curve layer and bring the model back. Now, we got to figure out where this thing is gonna land. Is it proud? Is it just tucked in here? Is it halfway, halfway? I'm kind of thinking I want it completely tucked in here. So I'm going to stick it in about that far, and then we'll go to the right-hand view, and then we have to make the recess for it. And the recess in the sketch shows that it actually starts in the plastic part and goes into the chrome. I think I'm going to override that decision for two reasons. One, because I'm being lazy and it's easier to model, but two, I actually think I don't like it being in the plastic. I think I want the plastic clean so that it would be easier to like wipe down and stuff like that, but mostly because I'm being lazy, if I'm being honest. Let's do this. So let's make the recess opening like that, and then I'm going to drop from the quads straight down. And that is our opening. Isolate command. Trim. Join. And then what I need to do is actually, I need to make the opening, and then I need to make the gap for the opening. And I may actually scale this out just a tiny hair to give myself just a little bit more room, like that. And then there's going to be a gap on the inside. So this section right here, I don't know if can you see my cursor? I'm doing a lot of pointing with my cursor. I want to make sure you can see my cursor. I'm not like right here and everybody's like, what are you talking about? This section here is actually going to be part of the original surface that we're going to bend in. And then this section here is going to be a blend between the original surface and the surface that we're going to bend. So what we're going to do is let's bring this back. And I need to pull out only the surfaces that I need to deal with. And in this case, I'm going to do that in shaded view, and I'm going to use the extract surfaces, not copy, and I'm going to extract this surface. And then I'm going to bring back everything, and I'm going to select my curves, and I'm going to isolate, and then I've got only what's left here, right? So this is all I want to work with. So I'm going to split this using these curves, and then it's going to give me this piece left. So now I need to design my gap, which is going to be something like a big parabola. And let's draw that using just a line segment. And I'm going to start. Let's use a center line. That'll be better because I can start in the center of this. I'm going to just draw out to about here, and then I'm going to grab that curve, change its degree to 3, which is going to give me 4 points, and then I'm going to pick those 2 points and pull them straight up. See how that gives me a really nice parabolic shape, and then I can scale it out if I need more or less. So that's going to be the shape of my interior surface, and I'm going to trim that surface out. Okay, so I've got this surface right here, this surface right here, and then I've built a gap. Now what I need to do, shrink, trim surface, we did that before, turn on the points, and then check this out. Instead of trying to do this by grabbing these and actually moving them, I'm going to pick the points of the surface, not the surface itself, but I'm actually going to pick the points, and I'm going to use the bend command. And I'm going to start at the bottom. I'm going to come up here, and I'm going to just bend these points in like that. And it makes a really nice procedural bend. Let's bring everything back and see how it relates to our button. And in this case, it's not even close to being able to see through our button. So maybe what I do is I say, okay, well, the button can come to here, and the surface, maybe it pushes in like that. Maybe this is a pretty deep blend. This is where you start making decisions as a designer, right? You start saying, okay, well, what's this thing going to look like, right? And I think I'm kind of okay with that because I think like it gives you a little thumb access up here, but it still keeps it tucked, but it's still kind of clean. I don't know. I don't know how you feel about that, but if you don't like it, go build your own toaster. So let's do just a blend surface, and that blend surface lives up here. This is one of my favorite tools in all of Rhino because it gives you, I'm going to set it to tangency. We don't need to go curvature. That's crazy. And it gives you a surface built on continuity, and it allows you to go ahead and adjust it as needed. Now, this is biting into the sides here, so I'm actually going to add some shape from here to here, and then from here to here. And I'm going to actually adjust those shapes individually, oops, other way, to tighten that up. And give myself a little bit more room. Now, it's still chewing into the sides of that, which means I may need to push this a little farther. And in this case, in version 6, blends are historically enabled, so I can just shove this back farther, bloop, and it updates. And maybe this shape is not the right shape. Maybe I should have, instead of pulling it in like that, maybe I should have trimmed it a little bit more closely to the shape of the outside opening. I was kind of hoping for a little taper on this, but maybe that's not working, or maybe I can just cheat and say, well, this just sticks out just a little farther. Maybe that's the right solution. It's the easy solution, that's for sure. So maybe for once in life, we'll do the easy thing and we'll go ahead and accept it like that. So then I'm going to just join this up, join everything back together. And then let's look and see where our naked edges are, which they should only be right here, and we should be able to fill that with the cap command. Now, cap didn't like that. So there's a couple of things I can do. I can just loft from side to side, because I know it's basically, that should work. And in that case, it did. Or I could have gone in and split up some edges and built a couple more surfaces or anything like that. But let's take a look and see what we have. So right now, we've pretty much got our toaster set up. The only thing that it needs now is a cord. And I would probably stick the cord coming out of this side. So let's do that. I'm going to just do that with a truncated cone, and I'm going to stick it somewhere like this. I don't want to have any directional constraint, so I'm going to just do something like this, and then pull it straight out the back, and then make that a little bigger. And then I'm going to use a rounded rectangle to do the little cord reliefs. And I'm going to just tap Alt and make copies. I'm not even going to worry about arraying it so that it's super precise. And then I'm going to move these down here like this. And then I'm going to just offset them a little bit. And then I'm going to use, because Wirecut only lets you use one input curve, I'm going to grab all of these guys and I'm going to just extrude them. I'm going to hold down Shift and extrude in both directions. I'm going to cap. This is just like little efficiencies, right? Oops, I didn't want that to trim all the way through, so let's just join it back up. I could go through and untrim that. Actually, what I should do is untrim this. So let's take this out, and I'm going to untrim this piece. Let's keep the trim curves. Got to do a little fixing here. And you can see that the trim curve is set up like this. So I'm going to explode the trim curve, delete this piece, replace this piece down here, and then trim again. Oops. And it's missing something up here. Let's join that. There we go. So we fixed that there. Bring it back, join it back in. All right, now we're back in business. Let's Boolean subtract from here. We're almost done, by the way, if you're wondering how much longer you're gonna have to tolerate this. Pull those out. Then I'm gonna run a chord through here. I'm gonna start at the center. Go to the front view, and I'm just gonna draw, oops, don't want it, persistent close. I'm just gonna throw a chord out here in space. Go to the top view, let's make it a little bit more interesting. Tuck it behind it so when it's in the rendering, it's, you don't see it. Like that. Then pull this one all the way through and then just pipe it. And that's too much. Still too much. There we go. That's what I was looking for. And pipe is historically enabled, so we can figure out where the ground plane is, which is going to be down here. And then we can just set this on the ground plane using nudge. There we go. That way we don't have it, it's not floating in space too badly. You don't want it like diving through the ground plane. You don't want it like, floating way out in space either. So I want it to look fairly natural as it leaves the object. Something like that. All right, and then when we render it, because the button's probably the most interesting part, we'll just do something like that. So you'll see the cord coming out the back, which tells you that it's a corded appliance, but we don't have to model the plug. Unless you had one built already, then you can just go ahead and do that. All right, and the last thing we want to do is, if we want to be crazy accurate, we can do a Boolean subtract from this using this. Don't delete it. And then I'm going to just shift, drag, and scale this just a tiny hair so that it leaves a tiny gap in there so it looks like it actually fits in there. All right, hide the drawing. Let's throw a few materials on here. Let's save it first. Faith may save your soul, but only Control S will save your data. Let's go to rendered mode. All right, so that's what we've got. And I'm going to hide all my curves. Actually, I'm just going to delete them for now. And then let's throw a few materials on here. So I'm going to get a chrome. I'm going to just use a metal. And the cool thing about version 6, sub-object selection, shift, control, click, 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 click. Right click, assign to objects. Boop. And we can assign, because this is a poly surface, it's all one piece, but we can use sub-object selection to assign materials to the poly surface individually. Let's make a new one, new material. This one's going to be plastic. I'm going to make it dark, but not exactly black. It's going to be a little off black. And then I'm going to make it not super shiny. And again, sub-object selection. In this case, I'm going to shift drag and get all of that. And I don't even mind that that's selected. I'm going to actually add that. Right-click assign. And then Control-Shift, click, click, click. Let's get this guy and this guy. Let's do the insides. Again, I'm shift control clicking to get the, and obviously we've got a intrusion with our button, which we would fix if this was a real object. It would be a much shallower button. Lies of the demo revealed. Like that. And then the button, let's do the buttons like a polished aluminum or something like that. So let's do metal, but let's roughen it up a little bit. And let's change it from being white. We're going to make it just a tiny bit gray. Assign it. And then maybe we'll make it a little bit more interesting in, actually, let's not do that. Let's do it in, what should we do it in? Let's do it in a different material. Let's do it in a different plastic, but let's make it a little bit shinier. Let's have it pretty well polished. And then let's add some accents in here, which would make it more interesting. So let's do this and this as aluminum. And then let's do the insides of this stuff like that. Maybe that's an LED screen or something, but that's a little nuttier than I want to get into right now. And let's make the outside of this. So it almost looks like it's got a rubber wrap on the end of it. And then the last thing we're going to do is just, I'm going to use the same material for the cord. Now our chrome is a little crazy. It's actually blowing out over here. So I'm actually going to maybe knock the reflectivity down on it just a hair. Maybe it's aluminum instead of chrome. You can see all that update real time. And maybe what we do is we don't want white. We want to go just a little darker, a little more contrast in there. And we can either use rendered mode and make our presentation off of rendered mode, or we can throw it into, maybe what I'll do is, because this highlight is blowing out, let's change the background. Instead of being a solid color white background, let's drop the background a little bit. And then that way those reflections are going to pop out just a hair more. Drop that just a little bit. That way the reflections show up a little bit. And then let's go ahead and throw it into ray trace mode. Let's save it first. And then we're just going to go throw it into ray trace mode. Now, I have a pretty big video card in this machine, so it's actually going to render fairly quickly. If you watch the counter down here in the bottom, you can see that that's spinning pretty quickly. If you don't have quite as burly of a video card, then this will go a little bit slower. But I've got 4,000 CUDA cores on this video card, so it goes pretty quick. And you can see that I'm floating a little bit, so I have to adjust my ground plane. Something in the object, because the ground plane's dynamic, something in the, I think part of the cord is actually lower than the feet, which is why it's floating. So we should actually just make sure that everything is on the same plane, and it will settle right back down. But that pretty much is the demo I have for you. So we went from clean sheet to production, and a model. This is a watertight model. You could throw this to a printer and actually print it, make prototypes of it, things like that. All right, any questions? If not, I'll let you roll, unless you want to sit and watch the counter spin and watch the render clean up. But this is about what I have for you. If you have any other questions, let me know. If not, I'll let you go for the day. Hour 25, not too bad for a product like this. If there's any other questions, let me know. If not, I'll let you go and say thank you for joining me. I'm Kyle Houchins, and this is getting started with Rhino for Windows. Thanks, everybody.